We've all seen our teams have their moments in the sun, taking in all the praise and making us happy for a change. But with great moments also comes a chance at heartbreak and letting us down. Unfortunately, for all 32 NFL fan bases, it's happened to them all. So I'm here to relive those moments. This is every NFL team's most crushing and most devastating loss. This was hard to choose, so this is strictly my opinion right here. And if I left one out or you have a better PTSD moment for a team I covered, let me know down below. So let's get it started. Arizona Cardinals, Super Bowl 43. Was there any doubt that it wouldn't be this one? The Cardinals were a surprise team in 2008, going 9-7 and winning the NFC West for the first time ever and their first division title since 1975. No one gave them much of a chance in the playoffs, and yet they beat an up-and-coming Falcons team, a very good Panthers team, and they took the Eagles to the limit in the NFC Championship game to punch their ticket to the Super Bowl against my Pittsburgh Steelers. It looked like the clock struck midnight on the Cardinals as they found themselves in a 20-7 hole at halftime, thanks to the greatest pick six in NFL history by James Harrison. However, Arizona mounted a comeback and eventually found themselves ahead 23-20 on a long touchdown pass to Larry Fitzgerald. But the Cardinals made a huge mistake, and it's that they gave Big Ben over 2.5 minutes to drive down the field to win the game. You just don't do that to one of the most clutch QBs to ever play. Sure enough, it took Big Ben 8 plays, 78 yards, and 2 minutes and 2 seconds to lead the game-winning drive, which ended with Ben finding Santonio Holmes in the back right side of the end zone with 35 seconds left. The Cardinals did nothing with the ensuing possession that ended with a strip sack by LaMarr Woodley and recovered by the Beard to seal the game. The Steelers won their 6th Lombardi, and Arizona still hadn't made it back to the big dance since then. Yes, Cardinals fans, both feet were down. Gotta love the toe tap. Atlanta Falcons, Super Bowl 51. Okay, so we all know what happened, so I'm just going to show the biggest mishaps in this game because talking about it at whole is too painful. Enjoy. Baltimore Ravens, the 2012 AFC Championship game. I wanted to put last month's divisional round loss to Buffalo, the 2011 divisional against the Steelers, AB's reach for the end zone on Christmas in 2016, 4th and 12 against the Bengals in 2017, or their divisional meltdown against Tennessee and Lamar's unanimous MVP season on here just to piss off Raven fans. But it's hard to find a bigger gut punch to the Ravens than this one. The 2011 Ravens went 12-4, won the AFC North, the second seed in the AFC, and had the number 3 defense with Defensive Player of the Year Donkey from Shrek. After beating the Texans in the AFC Divisional, they went to Foxborough to face the Patriots for the AFC crown. Baltimore took a 20-16 lead into the fourth quarter, but allowed a touchdown to go down 23-20. The thing that puts a smile on my face for this one, and in all honesty, puts this above the rest for the Ravens' losses, is these following things. Tom Brady played like total crap and the Ravens couldn't cash in on it. He threw no touchdowns and Baltimore picked him off twice, including in the fourth quarter down by 3 points with a little over 7 minutes to go. Then, with another chance to win the game with 24 seconds left in regulation, the Ravens went to the New England 19-yard line. Joe Flacco tossed a dart to Lee Evans in the end zone, and Evans dropped it on a great play by Sterling Moore that certainly would have won the game. Followed that up with Billy Cundiff horribly shanking a chip shot field goal that would have sent the game to overtime, and the Patriots were on their way to Super Bowl 46. At least the Ravens got Justin Tucker from this and went to the Super Bowl the next year, but they were that close to winning back-to-back Super Bowls and having half as many rings as the Steelers. Instead, they're still stuck on 2. They don't have Joe Flacco to be as clutch as hell in January anymore. Tucker is now Deshaun Watson 2.0, and now Lamar has a slightly better playoff resume than Dak Prescott. Buffalo Bills, the Music City Miracle. It was either this or Super Bowl 25 for the Bills, and I decided to go with the Music City Miracle. This was the last chance for the Bills to go back to the big dance in the 90s as they went 11-5 and had to be satisfied with being a wild card as the Colts won the AFC East that season. While the Bills weren't the same dominant squad they were throughout the 90s, they were still a formidable opponent. In the wild card, they faced the wild card Tennessee Titans in Nashville. Despite trailing 12-0 at halftime, the Bills mounted a comeback and then had a 16-15 lead in the fourth quarter, and then with 16 seconds left, the Bills kicked the ball to the Titans, and then that's when the controversy started. It was fielded by Lorenzo Neal, and he handed it back to Frank Wycheck. Wycheck then absolutely threw a forward pass to Kevin Dyson, and he went 75 yards for a touchdown, but it shouldn't have counted. Even ABC's commentators were saying it was a forward pass. This is why I think this won up Super Bowl 25. The Bills at least made it to 3 other Super Bowls after that loss, but this shouldn't have been a loss for the Bills. That should have been a penalty, negated the touchdown, and with the way Buffalo's defense buckled down in the second half, I believe they would have stopped Tennessee one last time. While I don't guarantee the Bills would have gone to the Super Bowl against the Rams, seeing that they would have had to play Indianapolis and Jacksonville in the next 2 rounds, Bills fans have the right to be irate at this as they were robbed of a playoff win. This loss set Buffalo back for decades as they wouldn't win another playoff game for another 21 years, and they wouldn't even make the playoffs again for another 18 years. That's why this lands on me right here for the Bills. Carolina Panthers, Super Bowl 38. Ah yes, Tom Brady's devil luck once again. Adam Vinatieri did miss 2 makeable field goals in this game, but the Patriots struck first when Mike Vrabel strip-sacked Jake Delhomme, and Brady cashed in on a 20-yard touchdown drive. Although the final of this was 32-29 and it suggests it was a shootout, Carolina constantly had to play catch-up in this game. Trailing 21-10 in the third, the Panthers got 2 touchdowns to eventually take a 22-21 lead, but failed 2 two-point attempts. However, Carolina's lead didn't last very long as New England retook the lead on their next drive, advancing 68 yards with the aid of a pair of completions from Brady to Givens for 43 total yards. Once again, the Patriots were faced with 3rd down and goal, but this time they scored with Brady's 1-yard touchdown pass to Vrabel, who had lined up in an eligible tight end position. This was despite New England's defense overwhelming Jake Delhomme early on, but what this game is most known for is John Casey kicking the ball out of bounds in a tied game at 29 with 1:13 left in regulation. It set up a 37-yard game-winning drive for Vinatieri to redeem himself in the game. Only Tom Brady's team could benefit from the opposing kicker kicking the ball out of bounds in a tie game with under 2 minutes to go in regulation or overtime. Chicago Bears, the double doink. I mean, there's zero excuse for the Bears to lose this game. Following a disastrous 2017 season that had some glimmer of promise, the Bears built up on that by being aggressive in the offseason. With an already tough defense, the Bears built up on it in the draft and free agency, and in 2018, the Bears fielded the #1 defense in the league. It could have been a legendary defense as well. With an offense that had enough talent to be a top offense, and despite a fluke season from Mitch Trubisky, Chicago went 12-4, won the NFC North, and due to a loaded NFC, had to be satisfied with the 3rd seed. In the wild card, they faced the Philadelphia Eagles, who were the defending Super Bowl champions, but Chicago was favored in this game as Philly was limping into the playoffs. While the Bears' defense held them at bay the entire game. Chicago won the total yards, won the turnover battle. Trubisky, while he wasn't great, wasn't awful either, and actually outplayed Nick Foles in this game. and virtually had the same time of possession. So the Bears were down 16-15 after giving up a late touchdown pass, but responded well by getting into field goal range to set up Cody Parkey. After the Eagles used their final timeout with 10 seconds left, Parkey's potential game-winning 43-yard kick was partially tipped by Eagles tackle Trayvon Hester, and it caused the ball to shift and hit the left upright crossbar before bouncing into the end zone. Foles kneeled it once to end the game, and this was as close the Bears would get to winning a playoff game since 2010. And now it seems like a weekly thing for the Bears to find inexcusable ways to lose games. Cincinnati Bengals, the 2016 AFC wildcard. There's nothing I can say here that you already don't know. The Bengals went 12-4 in 2015, and while they slowed down towards the end of the season after starting 8-0, they were still a favorite to finally end their long playoff win drought. Then Andy Dalton was forced to miss the remainder of the season with a finger injury, but Cincinnati was still an offensive powerhouse. Going into their rain-soaked wildcard match with hated rival Pittsburgh, the Bengals' defense held up well. They kept the Steelers out of the end zone until the third quarter, but the Bengals' offense remained dormant. Cincinnati then rattled off 16 unanswered points to take a 16-15 lead under the 2-minute warning, and backup Landry Jones threw a pick to Pittsburgh fan favorite Vontaze Burfict, remember that name, on the ensuing possession. The Bengals had the game won right there. All they had to do was kneel the ball, force the Steelers to use their timeouts, kick another field goal to go up by 4 points, and Pittsburgh would have had to drive the length of the field with an injured Big Ben who was going to come back regardless in the game to win the game in the rain with no timeouts. Typically a situation you lose. Instead, they ran the ball and Hill fumbled it right back to the Steelers the very next play. So Big Ben did end up returning to the game, and he led the team 74 yards in 9 plays for the game-winning score. But of course, everyone remembers what happened with just 22 seconds left. As Big Ben threw a pass that was intended for Antonio Brown, the pass fell incomplete, but Burfict was flagged for a personal foul for contact with Brown's helmet. Brown was injured on the play, and he was being attended to, and the officials were dealing with both teams. Adam Pac-Man Jones was flagged for a personal foul after an altercation with Steelers linebacker coach Joey Porter. It gave the Steelers another 15 yards and moved the ball to the Bengals 17. On the next play, Chris Boswell kicked a 35-yard field goal with 18 seconds left to win the game. Out of all the Bengals playoff meltdowns, not just with Marvin Lewis, but in franchise history, this one will easily go down as the most inexcusable and self-inflicted one. Cleveland Browns, the fumble. I have so many candidates for this one here. The drive, Red Right 88, Dwayne Rudd forgetting he was on a football field, the 0-3 wildcard loss, or any loss to the Steelers for that matter, the kick 6, Week 17 in 2017, Bottlegate, Modell moving the franchise to Baltimore, among others. However, out of all of them, I think Ernest Biner's fumble at the Denver 1-yard line takes the cake for me. Back in the 80s, when the Browns were actually a legit Super Bowl contender, and some of you watching this weren't even born yet, the Browns suffered a heartbreaking loss to the Denver Broncos the year before the century in the AFC Championship game. Both teams came back strong in 87 and made it back to the conference championship. Unlike 86, however, Cleveland trailed throughout most of the game, but they mounted a comeback. They eventually got the game tied at 31 in the fourth quarter, but John Elway led another touchdown drive to retake a 38-31 lead. The Browns got the ball at their own 25-yard line and moved 67 plays in just 6 minutes, covering 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Then, the moment that puts this game on here. Biner took a handoff and appeared to be on his way to score the game-tying touchdown. Then the Browns did get points on the board. It was because Ernest Biner fumbled at the 1-yard line and Denver recovered and gave the Browns an intentional safety to win 38-33. Now we can play the what-if game. What if Biner doesn't fumble here? The Browns tie the game, possibly win, and go on to the Super Bowl where they probably would have gotten whopped by Washington. but they fumbled it away. The Browns is the Browns, am I right? Dallas Cowboys, the catch. My Steeler bias wants to put Super Bowl 13 on here, but Jackie Smith is one of the biggest scapegoats in sports history. His drop hurt, but the Steelers got 2 touchdowns after that to make it 35-17 deep in the fourth quarter. Then Dallas got 2 touchdowns essentially in garbage time to pretty up the score. The reason I went with the catch is because the game was close all the way. So let's cut to the chase. The Cowboys led 27-21, and it's 3rd and 3 at the Dallas 6 with 58 seconds left in regulation. San Francisco lined up in a split-back formation, and when the snap happened, Montana was supposed to roll to his right to find Freddie Solomon to set up a 1st and goal. But Dallas was ready as Solomon slipped on the route and pass rushed Joe Montana that forced him to improvise. Dwight Clark's pattern called for him to cut diagonally left across the end zone, stop, and immediately reverse his path, running right along the back boundary of the end zone. Montana then threw a high pass to the back of the end zone that seemed to be heading out of bounds until Clark, closely covered by Cowboys defender Everson Walls, made a leaping catch with his fingertips and landed just in bounds at the back right corner of the end zone to score the touchdown and tie the game with 51 seconds left. That came at the end of a 14-play, 83-yard game-winning drive engineered by Montana. Dallas would threaten as they got a few plays to get them in position before Danny White fumbled and San Francisco recovered. That allowed Montana to run out the clock. The catch symbolized the end of the Cowboys' domination of the NFC since the conference's inception in 1970 and the beginning of the 49ers dynasty of the 1980s. Denver Broncos, the 2013 AFC Divisional. In Peyton Manning's first season with the Denver Broncos, he was magnificent. He threw 37 touchdowns for 4,659 yards, a 68.6 completion percentage, and led the league in QB rating, net yards per attempt, and adjusted net yards per attempt, and won Comeback Player of the Year due to him having a bleak future with needing major neck surgery the year before. Denver went 13-3, the first seed in the AFC, and met up with the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Divisional. So fast forwarding to the fourth quarter in this game where the game is tied at 28 and it featured a touchdown pass from Peyton Manning and a 104-yard kickoff return for a score. Peyton then drove the Broncos 77 yards in 4 minutes and 58 seconds that ended with a 17-yard touchdown pass to Demaryius Thomas and had a 35-28 lead. Denver eventually got the clock down to a minute left, still up by 7, and Baltimore had no timeouts left. All they had to do was stop them once, and they had looked to have done that with 39 seconds left, and the Ravens having 3rd and 3 from their own 30. Then Raheem Moore happened. He disgustingly misplayed Joe Flacco's Hail Mary throw that allowed Jacoby Jones to run for the final 70 yards to put a dagger through the hearts of Broncos fans. In overtime, both teams exchanged possessions, and Peyton threw an interception that helped set up Justin Diddy to kick the game winner in double overtime. Just like that, Peyton's late-game heroics were all for naught. That awful misplay by Moore cost the Broncos a potential Super Bowl title, as I think they would have beaten New England in the AFC title game the following week, and they would have had to play a great but beatable 49ers team in Super Bowl 47. Denver at least got to the Super Bowl the next season behind another legendary season by the Sheriff, but as you all know, they got the ever-loving shit kicked out of them by Seattle in Super Bowl 48. In terms of heartbreaking losses for the Broncos, this is way up there. Detroit Lions, the 2025 NFC Divisional. This one may surprise you as it's so recent as it just happened last month. But out of all the painful losses in Detroit Lions history, I think it's fair to say that this one hurts the most. The 2024 Lions were a very special team in the hearts of not only Lions fans, but most NFL fans, unless of course outside the NFC North. They went 15-2, the number 1 seed in the NFC, and earned a first-round bye. It was a franchise record in wins and the first time they ever played as the number 1 seed. They had the number 1 scoring offense in the league, and head coach Dan Campbell was a popular favorite to win Coach of the Year, considering that even with the defense full of players on IR, he still instilled a culture in this team that won the franchise 15 games. Despite the injuries, Detroit were still heavy Super Bowl favorites, and everyone was ecstatic to see them in the divisional. They faced the number 5 seed Washington Commanders, who went 12-5, and they had a surprising season of their own with rookie sensation QB Jaden Daniels. Although there were red flags that Washington could pull off the upset, everyone seemed to brush them off and still say that Detroit would win. The Lions were an 8.5-point favorite going into this game, and being up 14-10 in the second quarter, Washington put the pressure on them for the rest of the game. A 58-yard touchdown pass from Daniels to McLaurin, followed by a 40-yard pick six, gave Washington a 24-14 lead with 5:25 left in the half. Detroit battled back the whole game, but the Commanders were ahead double digits most of the game. The dagger came in the fourth quarter with the Lions down 38-28, and they were looking to respond after Washington scored another touchdown. Detroit ran a trick play on 1st and 10 that saw the snap to wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he flipped it back to Jameson Williams, where he fired it right back to Gibbs. Washington read it immediately, and it was intercepted at the Lions' 34. Washington capitalized on the gaffe on an 8-play, 4.5-minute drive that ended with a Jeremy McNichols 1-yard touchdown run that put Washington ahead 45-28 with 7.5 to go. The comeback wasn't impossible, but it was improbable for Detroit, but they just couldn't get it done. Goff threw 3 more interceptions in the game, and Detroit coughed up the ball 5 times in total, and the incredible 15-win season for Detroit went up in smoke. Green Bay Packers, the 2015 NFC Championship. I was considering Super Bowl 32 and the 2008 NFC Championship as well, but I think I speak for all Packers fans when I say that this is the biggest choke in franchise history, the biggest missed opportunity for Aaron Rodgers to win another Lombardi, and it was the worst overall loss in Packers history. In 2014, Green Bay went 12-4, won the NFC North, earned a first-round bye in the NFC. Rodgers went on full God mode once again and won his second MVP. They went to Seattle to face the defending Super Bowl champion Seahawks for the right to go to Super Bowl 49. Green Bay appeared to have this game in the bag as they had a lead late in the fourth quarter. Despite the Seahawks being asleep, Green Bay didn't capitalize as much as they should have, as they had multiple drives stall in Seahawks territory and settled for field goals instead of being aggressive. Seattle eventually woke up on offense as Russell Wilson led the Seahawks to a touchdown drive that ended with him running it in for a score to cut it to 19-14 with a little over 2 minutes to go. The Packers were fully expecting an onside kick, and then the disaster known as Brandon Bostic happened. He inexplicably went up to try and catch the onside kick and horribly botched it. Seattle got the ball back and scored another touchdown by Marshawn Lynch 3 plays later to take a 22-19 lead with a 2-point conversion that Clinton Dix gave as bad of an effort on than my ex did in my last relationship. Mason Crosby did tie the game and forced overtime on a field goal in the last seconds, but that 2-point conversion had been stopped. That field goal would have won the game for Green Bay instead of send it to an extra frame. Well, Seattle took advantage of it from the get-go. Seattle got the ball first. Russ led the Seahawks downfield and then found Jermaine Kearse for the game-winning 35-yard touchdown pass. Rodgers never got another chance to win this game for Green Bay, and Seattle repeated as NFC champions. In my opinion, Mike McCarthy is undoubtedly the biggest culprit for this loss, but despite him playing it safe and the very questionable play calls, the Packers still looked like they had the game in hand. This inexcusable choke was a golden opportunity for the Packers to become a potential dynasty in the Rodgers years, and they blew it big time. Houston Texans, the 2020 AFC Divisional. Yeah, having a 24-0 lead and being outscored 51-7 the rest of the way is definitely going to land you on here. The Texans went 10-6 in 2019 and won the AFC South. They won a close wildcard game over the Buffalo Bills and were on their way to Kansas City in the Divisional against the number 2 seed Chiefs, who the Texans beat in the regular season at Arrowhead. Houston wasn't favored in this game, but after they took a 21-0 lead after the first quarter on 2 touchdown passes from Deshaun Schneider and added a field goal to go up 24-0 with a little under 11 minutes to go in the second, people had severe doubts that Houston would blow this game. Then on 4th and 4 with 8.5 to go in the first half, up 24-7, Bill O'Brien called one of the worst plays that you'll ever see with a fake punt on the Chiefs' 31. Needless to say, it didn't go very well. This is when Houston blew the game. You never ever give Mahomes a short field like that, but Bill O'Brien seemed to be arrogant that the first touchdown drive was a fluke. A couple plays later, Mahomes found Travis Swift for a touchdown pass and then connected with him 2 more times in the same quarter, and all of a sudden it went from Houston shocking the league up 24-0 to trailing 28-24 at halftime. The rest of the game was basically garbage time. Kansas City went on to win 51-31, and Mahomes finished with 5 touchdown passes, as this loss should have gotten Bill O'Brien fired on the spot, and this set Houston back 3 seasons. A Chiefs comeback, more like a delayed slaughter. Indianapolis Colts, the 2006 AFC Divisional. It was between this and Super Bowl III for me personally, and I went with this one because I'm a biased-ass Steeler fan. All joking aside, I decided to go with the 06 Divisional because this loss officially labeled Peyton Manning a playoff choker. The Colts had already crushed the Steelers on a Monday night game in the regular season. Indy was the best team in the league at 14-2, and unlike in previous seasons, you could argue that the Colts' playoff losses in the Manning era that prevented the Colts from winning a Lombardi was that the Colts just faced better teams in their way, but this season felt like it was truly the Colts' time. And finally, after this loss, everyone adopted the expectation that Peyton's Colts would lose in the playoffs. Indy found themselves down 21-3 through 3 quarters, and the prolific offense had been shut down by the Steeler defense. In the 4th quarter, the Colts finally got it going and shaved the deficit to 21-18. After a Steelers stop that made Indy turn it over on downs, the Bus looked to seal the game with a touchdown run, but he had a very rare fumble at the 1-yard line. It was recovered by Nick Harper, who had appeared to get the go-ahead score on a fumble 6. But he should have ran to the sideline to guarantee a score and instead ran down midfield, and Big Ben made one of the most overlooked plays in NFL history with the game-saving tackle at the Colts 42. The Colts would get the ball to the Steelers' 28-yard line with a couple of nice stops by rookie Bryant McFadden, and Indy went with kicker Mike Vanderjagt to tie the game and send it to overtime. He badly shanked the kick to the right, and the Steelers were able to run out the clock, headed to their 2nd straight AFC Championship, and won the Super Bowl a few weeks later. The reason I put this above Super Bowl III is because Indy mounted a comeback in this game and came up short, whereas in Super Bowl III, it was just seen as a fluke upset, and they never had a chance in that game. Now Peyton Manning was never expected to win a Lombardi. At least the Colts would win it all the next season, but this loss is by far their biggest missed opportunity in Peyton's career. Jacksonville Jaguars, the 2018 AFC Championship. Jacksonville came out of nowhere in 2017 to boast a 10-6 record and win the AFC South for the first time in a decade with the league's best defense. In the playoffs, they stymied the Bills in the wild card and upset the Steelers in the Divisional to go to their first AFC Championship in 18 years against the dynasty and defending champion New England Patriots. With a 20-10 lead early in the 4th quarter, it looked as if the Jags were on their way to their first ever Super Bowl. However, this is the Brady Belichick Patriots we're talking about, so it's never over till it's over. That's exactly what happened. Jacksonville's offense got shut down the rest of the way as New England's defense stopped them on their final 4 drives, and Tom Brady had 2 touchdown passes to Danny Amendola to give New England a 24-20 lead. But what everyone remembers about this game is Miles Jack being incorrectly ruled down fumble recovery in the 4th that certainly would have been taken back for a touchdown to make it 27-10. Had it been ruled correctly, Jacksonville wins. So yeah, you can say they got hosed in this game, but the fact is the number one defense in the league folded and was no match for Tom Brady's incredible screen passes that only he himself can do and no other quarterback can. In the end, Blake Bortles turned the ball over on downs on his final shot. The Patriots won 24-20 and went on to lose the Super Bowl to Philadelphia. Much like the Houston Texans entry, this loss set Jacksonville back a few years as well, and they didn't even make the playoffs again until 2022 when they randomly won the AFC South, and now they're right back to being an irrelevant franchise, and in all honesty, New England may be heading in that direction too. Kansas City Chiefs, the 2022 AFC Championship. I decided to go with the 21-22 AFC Championship for two reasons. A Mahomes team is not supposed to blow a lead like this, especially at home, and just to piss off Mahomes bandies to remind them that their generational quarterback did blow them a game. Yes, I said he blew them a game. The Chiefs had a big lead in the second half that should have been game over, and in that second half, it looked as if Mahomes had never seen a football in his life. The Bengals eventually tied the game at 21 after picking off Mahomes, and even after L'Jarius Sneed picked off Joe Burrow, the Chiefs did nothing with it and ended with Trey Hendrickson sacking Mahomes on third down in Bengals territory that forced a punt. Cincinnati then advanced 46 yards in 11 plays, where Evan McPherson's 52-yard field goal gave the Bengals their first lead of the game. Mahomes would redeem himself a little as he led the Chiefs to the Bengals goal line, but they stalled again where Mahomes got sacked twice, and one of which he coughed up the ball, pushing them back. Harrison Butker sent the game to overtime with a field goal. The Chiefs won the overtime coin toss, taking the first possession of overtime, and this is where I put this on the list here. Mahomes threw a pass that should have been picked off, only for him to chuck up a long pass to Tyreek Hill where the ball was deflected by Jesse Bates and intercepted by Von Bell. Cincinnati then drove the ball to the Chiefs' 13, where McPherson kicked the game winner to send the Bengals to the Super Bowl. Yeah, blowing a 38-10 lead against the Colts 8 years prior was awful, and had this game not happened, the 2019 AFC Championship loss would easily take the cake. But in my opinion, this is the worst loss in Chiefs history because unlike the aforementioned games, 38-10 was an anomaly, and one play really defined 2019. This was inexcusable because the Chiefs had a series of awful misuses that was just so out of character for them, as they were the cream of the crop in the AFC, and the one guy who's supposed to make the franchise better cost them everything in this game. Las Vegas Raiders, the Tuck Rule. You all know the story by now. In the 2001-02 playoffs, the Oakland Raiders headed to Foxborough to face the number 2 seed Patriots in a blizzard. Despite them being the second seed, the Raiders were favored to win, and they looked to prove everyone right as they had a 13-3 lead in the fourth quarter. New England cut it to 13-10 on a touchdown drive late in the fourth quarter, and then the big one. With a minute 50 left in regulation, Charles Woodson hit Tom Brady on his right side. However, as Brady was pumping the ball, he appeared to tuck it as he was hit. The ball came out. Oakland recovered and were able to drain the rest of the clock out and head to Pittsburgh for the AFC crown. Or so we thought. Yeah, Brady fans, I understand it was a rule, but I really don't give a crap because it was still a fumble and it should have ended your season. Name me one other quarterback in NFL history that benefited from this rule and got bailed out by this in this big of a moment in a playoff game. Exactly. You can't. Taking advantage of the second chance, however, Adam Vinatieri hit a game-tying field goal in a blizzard to force overtime. In overtime, New England got the ball to the Raiders' 5-yard line, where Vinatieri hit the game winner from 23 to send New England to the AFC Championship. This was actually one of the more difficult choices because we all know the two biggest L's in Raider history are this and the Immaculate Reception. Both were playoff games, both can be seen as flukes, and both were incredibly controversial. My deciding factor for this entry is not so much the loss itself, but how they recovered from the loss. At least with the Immaculate Reception, the Raiders recovered well from it, made it back to several AFC championships, and won 3 Super Bowls. With the Tuck Rule, Not only does the rule not even exist anymore, but the Raiders have become one of the biggest laughing stocks in the league since then. Sure, they made it to the Super Bowl the following season where they got demolished by the Bucs, but the Raiders still have yet to win the AFC West and a playoff game since the 2002 season, and many view this loss as the beginning of the downward spiral of the franchise and the beginning of the Patriots dynasty. I agree. Los Angeles Chargers, the 2007 AFC Divisional. I dare you to call Tom Brady unlucky. The 06 Chargers were absolutely stacked, going 14-2 with MVP LaDainian Tomlinson dominating the league in rush yards with 1,815 yards, as well as setting the NFL single-season records for rushing touchdowns with 28 and total touchdowns with 31. They moved on from Drew Brees and decided to give Phillip Rivers the starting job at QB, which, looking back on that, may have been a regrettable move for the Chargers. Nevertheless, San Diego also fielded the number 7 defense, and their only 2 losses were by a combined 3 points, and they easily could have gone 16-0 if not for that. So when they clinched the league's best record and met up with the Patriots in the Divisional, many expected Marty Schottenheimer to get over the hump with the best season he's ever had and at least go to the AFC Championship. But once you go against Tom Brady's playoff luck, you get BS like this matchup. This was a ridiculously winnable game for the Chargers. San Diego led 14-10 at halftime and a 21-13 lead in the fourth, and could have been up by a lot more had they been able to take advantage of Brady looking like crap through 3 quarters. This allowed New England to take a 24-21 lead late in the fourth quarter, and then Brady appeared to have thrown his 4th pick of the game when Marlon McCree picked him off, but it got fumbled back to New England. Are you surprised? Still leading, Rivers got the Chargers into field goal range in the dying seconds of regulation, and Nate Kading missed the kick that would have sent the game to overtime. San Diego's magical season was wasted, and the closest the Chargers would get back to this level of domination would probably be the 2009 season, but even then, that season had some setbacks. It's just too bad that guys like Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, and Drew Brees don't have the ability to have their game-losing picks be fumbled back to them because they just don't want to win badly enough. Los Angeles Rams, Super Bowl 36. Oh, look, another game that involves Tom Brady's devil luck in the playoffs and him doing bare minimum. The greatest show on turf were 2 years removed from winning Super Bowl 34, and in 2001, they were arguably even better than that 99 team at 14-2. Kurt Warner won his 2nd MVP, which would make the Rams win the last 3 MVPs, as Warner won it in that 99 season, while Marshall Faulk won it in 2000. St. Louis became the first team in NFL history to open 3 consecutive seasons with 6 straight wins, and the first to score 500 or more points in 3 consecutive seasons. So when they made it to the Super Bowl against the 14-point underdog New England Patriots, many thought the Rams would become a dynasty. Well, the other team, little did we know, would kickstart their dynasty. The Patriots' defense held the Rams to just 17 points and also got a pick 6. Brady only led the offense to 13 points and just 145 yards and still won MVP despite playing like trash. The Rams tied the game at 17 before a blatant intentional grounding call on Brady wasn't called on him on their game-winning drive, and Vinatieri was able to hit the game winner. Warner wasn't himself in the 2002 season as he got off to a hideous start and he eventually broke a finger on his throwing hand. The Rams cut him after the 2003 season, and from 2004 to 2016, the Rams only made the playoffs once. So this Super Bowl 36 loss really took a toll on the franchise and set them back, and that's why it lands on here. Miami Dolphins, 1995 AFC Divisional. Dan Marino's Dolphins were notorious for getting destroyed in the playoffs, but the 1994-95 playoffs are one of the very few exceptions. The 94 Dolphins weren't dominant by any means, but this proved to be Dan Marino's last great season of his career. He put up numbers that for 2025 would hold up pretty good. 4,453 passing yards and 30 touchdowns. Miami had the number 3 offense and won the AFC East that season, but the reason Miami didn't finish better than that was because Miami's defense was below average, as it had been throughout much of Marino's career. Regardless, the Dolphins defeated the Chiefs in the wild card 27-17 and headed out to San Diego to take on the eventual AFC champion Chargers. Marino lit up the Chargers in the first half with 3 touchdown passes, and Miami took a 21-6 halftime lead. It looked like the Dolphins were well on their way to a rematch with Marino's hometown team and the Pittsburgh Steelers for the AFC crown. But Miami absolutely imploded in the second half. After giving up a safety, the Chargers scored on a 24-yard touchdown run to cut it to 21-15. The Dolphins stalled on offense again, and the Chargers took a 22-21 lead with 35 seconds left. Marino got the Dolphins into field goal range to win the game, but Pete Stoyanovich badly pulled the kick wide right, and the Chargers ended up winning by that final score. Miami did stall, but the Chargers dominated in time of possession in the third and also benefited from several dumb penalties by the Dolphins. After this loss, Marino just alternated from being average to just pretty good and looking washed for the final seasons of his career, and Miami was never truly a true Super Bowl contender after this. I know many of you were expecting me to put 62-7 on here, and while losing by that score is degrading to say the least, that game was over in the first quarter, and as I just mentioned, it was clear that Marino was washed, as that would be his send-off game. This loss here was the Dolphins' last chance to win a Lombardi in the Marino era, and unlike other playoff losses where the Dolphins got blown out, this was a close game that Miami was in control of, and they blew it. That's going to trump a blowout loss, in my opinion. Minnesota Vikings, the 2010 NFC Championship. Arguably, no other fan base in the NFL has endured as much heartbreak as the Vikings. But for me, I narrowed it down to the 1998-99 and the 2009-2010 NFC Championships. I came up with a compromise. 99 is their biggest choke, and 2010 is their worst overall loss. The Vikings were poised for a run with Adrian Peterson establishing himself as a superstar, an elite defense, drafting Percy Harvin, Sidney Rice becoming a reliable weapon, and Brett Favre donned the logo to get revenge on the Packers for the Aaron Rodgers drama. He came out of nowhere to turn in one of the best seasons of his career. The Vikings did finish 12-4 and got a first-round bye in the NFC and met up with the Saints in the NFC Championship. In this game, the Vikings turned the ball over 5 times, one of them I'll be emphasizing in a bit, fumbled the ball 6 times in total, but they still managed to get almost 500 yards of offense. And then after a big stop late in the game, they capitalized with a touchdown to tie the game again. The Vikings stopped the Saints again, and Favre got the Vikings in field goal range with under 20 seconds left in regulation. But then he committed the cardinal sin of quarterbacks. He forced a pass across his body that was intercepted. The game went to overtime, and Favre never got a chance to redeem himself. The Saints won the OT coin toss and kicked the game-winning field goal to send them to their first and only Super Bowl win where they won. This, to me, is the loss that stings the most for the Vikings because they made so many mistakes in this game and yet somehow made up for it, and they were given a golden opportunity to win the game, and they blew it at the worst possible time. I truly believe the Vikings would have beaten the Colts in Super Bowl 44 as well, whereas I'm unsure if they were going to beat the Broncos in Super Bowl 33 because that team was stacked as well. That's why it lands on here for me. New England Patriots, Super Bowl 42. I mean, come on, guys. What else was it going to be? Unless you live under a rock, you know that the 2007 Patriots went 16-0, made it to the Super Bowl, and were a little over 5 minutes away from being the first ever 19-0 team. The Pats led 7-3 at halftime, but then the Giants fought back as Eli Manning found David Tyree, more on him in a bit, for a touchdown pass to retake the lead for the Giants. Both teams punted, and New England found the end zone on a Brady to Moss connection, who was left wide open in the end zone because the corner fell. Then came probably the biggest argument for Eli Manning's Hall of Fame case. Personally, I don't believe he's one, but that's another topic for later. People remember this game for Tyree's iconic helmet catch on third down, but let's not forget the Giants converting a 4th and 1 earlier in the drive, New York converting a 3rd and 11, and Asante Samuel dropping a for sure interception that would have sealed the perfect season for New England. Instead, New England's offense flopped all game. Eli found Plaxico Burress to put New York ahead 17-14 with 35 seconds left, and the Patriots went 4-out to close out the game. Before you know it, 19-0 had become 18-1, and the world became a much better place because of it. I said in my personal opinion, Eli Manning is not a Hall of Famer, but he'll always have my respect from preventing the Patriots from having at least 8 rings. New Orleans Saints, the 2019 NFC Championship. The Saints are another franchise who's endured some painful losses like the River City Relay, the 2012 NFC Divisional, and the Minneapolis Miracle, among others. However, no one can deny that the NOLA no call stands out the most. In 2018, the Saints went 13-3, the first seed in the NFC, and the best team they had since their Super Bowl season in 2009. So it was easy to see why the Saints were a heavy Super Bowl favorite. They made their first NFC title game in 9 years as they took on the LA Rams, who also went 13-3 and the number 1 offense in the league, but the Saints had beaten the Rams in the regular season and knocked the Rams to the 2nd seed in the NFC. With a tie game at 20 with just a little over 3 minutes left in regulation, the Saints started driving and they moved the ball 57 yards and got the ball to the Rams' 13-yard line. On third down, Drew Brees threw to Tommy Lee Lewis but was decked by Rams corner McCole Roby-Coleman. He got there way too early before the ball could even get to Lewis and committed blatant pass interference. Instead of a running clock and a first down, the clock stopped and the Saints were forced to kick a field goal with 1:45 left. Jared Goff took advantage of the blunder and drove LA 45 yards to field goal range where Greg Zuerlein hit the game-tying field goal to send the game to overtime. New Orleans won the overtime coin toss, but Brees was picked off early on. This set up excellent field position for the Rams, and Zuerlein hit the game winner from 57 yards to send the Rams to the Super Bowl and rip the hearts out of Saints fans. As I said in the beginning, this one stands out to me as the most painful loss for the Saints, because whereas the River City Relay was just shit luck, 2012 falls on the defense, and the Minneapolis Miracle was just a fluke occurrence, this was a highway robbery for a Saints Super Bowl title. Brees threw the pick in overtime, and the Saints had 2 double-digit leads, but 1, the Saints were in control of the game even when the Rams tied the game, and number 2, there shouldn't have even been an overtime. If you know me, you know that I almost never put a loss on officiating, but the 2019 NFC Championship is my only exception. New York Giants, miracle at the new Meadowlands. I almost went with the 2002-03 NFC wildcard for the Giants, but while they did blow a 38-14 lead against San Francisco, that ending also had controversy that should have been offsetting penalties. So I went with their Week 15 2010 matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles at home that ended up deciding the NFC East winner. Both teams came into this game at 9-4, and the Giants looked to sweep their hated rivals for the first time since 2007. It looked to be the case as with 8 minutes left, the Giants had a seemingly unconquerable 31-10 lead. But you might want to either mute the video or just click off of the video altogether if you're a Giants fan. With Philly scoring 3 straight touchdowns and the Giants stalling on offense, the Eagles tied the game at 31 late in the game. Next up, the big one. New York got the ball back with 1:10 left, and after 2 Eli Manning incompletions to start it off, and with him getting sacked on third down, the Giants were pushed back to their own 29. New York called a timeout as the play clock expired, and they punted on 4th and 12. Now, I agree with punting right there, but not who Matt Dodge punted to. Instead of punting the ball out of bounds to pretty much ensure overtime, he kicked a line drive on a high snap to the Eagles' 35 to Deshaun Jackson. Jackson misplayed the punt at first but recovered and ran right through a group of Giants and made it to midfield, and Jason Avant made Jackson a bigger opening on a block, and there was no stopping him after that. Jackson ran parallel to the goal line before crossing the pylon to ensure time had expired and then finished the return with a touchdown. Philly had scored 28 straight points in 8 minutes, and Giants coach Tom Coughlin was justifiably irate at the moment. A win for the Giants would most likely have clinched the East for them, and after this they got manhandled by Green Bay, and they won at Washington in the final week of the season, but they missed the playoffs at 10-6 due to tiebreakers. As I said, their playoff meltdown against the 49ers would be most people's entry for this, but unlike that game, this loss comes with no controversy, and the Giants have no one to blame but themselves for this one. New York Jets, the 1999 AFC Championship. I literally had to Google this one for the Jets because have you ever had a recollection of the Jets losing a game in heartbreaking fashion? Maybe the 2004 AFC Divisional against the Steelers, but the Jets were a cute underdog that season, going up against a Steeler team chasing history. 2 years prior, the Jets had their worst record in franchise history at 1-15, but 2 years later, the Jets had their best record ever at 12-4. They earned a first-round bye. Career journeyman Vinny Testaverde had probably the best season of his career with 29 touchdowns and 7 picks for 3,256 yards. Curtis Martin rushed for 1,287 yards, and that still stands as the franchise mark. And amazingly, the 98 Jets are one of 2 teams in NFL history to win 7 games against teams who went to the playoffs. In the playoffs, they defeated the Jaguars 34-24 for their first playoff win in 12 years and met up with the absolutely stacked Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship. The Jets got off to a nice start, leading 10-0 in the second quarter, but the Broncos rattled off 20 straight points to lead 20-10 at halftime and added another field goal later on. A 23-10 loss looks like that the Jets had no chance in this game, but considering the 20 spot came in the second quarter and the defense held up okay the rest of the way, New York never got going on offense again as they turned the ball over 3 times in the fourth quarter to break their backs officially. This would be legendary coach Bill Parcells' only conference championship loss. The Jets wouldn't win another playoff game until 2009 despite making it a few times after this game, and are now right there with their state mates the Giants for the biggest laughingstock in the NFL. Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl 57. In a sea of frustrating disappointments for the Philadelphia Eagles, I personally think Super Bowl 57 stands out as the worst for them. You could argue in Super Bowl 39 that while the Eagles were great, they were facing a team who was simply better and were looking to cement themselves as a dynasty. In Super Bowl 57, however, the Chiefs may have had the better quarterback, but I would say the better overall team lost. The Eagles went 14-3 in 2022 and earned a first-round bye after they built off a surprising season in 2021 where they made the playoffs. The big offseason addition in A.J. Brown complemented the Eagles' well-rounded offense and arguably the best defense in the NFL. Philadelphia looked like the clear-cut best team in the league all season and advanced all the way to their second Super Bowl in 5 years. In that Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia jumped out to a 24-14 halftime lead and looked well on their way to winning their second Lombardi. At this point, the only mistake the Eagles made was a fumble 6 from Jalen Hurts, but Kansas City would play nearly flawless in the second half, and Philadelphia folded as well. Down 35-27 with just over 9 minutes remaining in regulation, Hurts drove the Eagles and scored on a quarterback sneak plus a 2-point conversion attempt to tie the game at 35. Philadelphia's defense remained unable to stop the Chiefs, however, and Mahomes drove into the red zone. A controversial holding penalty on Eagles corner James Bradbury allowed the Chiefs to run down most of the remaining time before kicking the game-deciding field goal from 27 yards out. This was an easily winnable game for the Eagles as Hurts had a better game than Mahomes, had more total yards than the Chiefs, and destroyed them in time of possession. The Eagles' stout defense failed to stop Kansas City in the second half as they scored on every possession in the second half and even got a long punt return. That's why I rank this loss above all the others for the Eagles. Pittsburgh Steelers, Super Bowl 30. Okay, here's the one that most of you have been waiting for. As successful as a franchise that the Steelers are, they're also no stranger to playoff disappointments. To me, Super Bowl 30 is the worst because the Steelers should have won this game. In 1995, the Steelers went 11-5 and earned a first-round bye in the AFC, the number 2 defense, the number 6 offense in the league, but lacked a decent run game, much like the team nowadays. Cordell Stewart rarely saw chances to play QB because Cowher had used him for select plays on offense, and a certain other individual had the starting job. However, the Steelers advanced to their first Super Bowl in 16 years and faced the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas jumped out to an early 10-0 lead after the first quarter. Down 20-7 going into the fourth quarter, it looked like smooth sailing for the Cowboys here. But here's where shit hit the fan and why it lands on this list. Down 20-17, the Steelers' defense finally settled down and looked ready to take the lead. Neil O'Donnell, there I said it, threw a terrible pass to John Cena in the flat and intercepted by Larry Brown. This was nearly identical to O'Donnell's first pick in the game, also to Brown. Dallas scored 2 plays later to go back up by 10, and that would be the final score. The Steelers had outgained the Cowboys in total yards, had 25 first downs compared to Dallas's 15, and limited their powerful run attack to just 56 yards and lost. However, they were unable to overcome O'Donnell's interceptions, which led to 2 Dallas touchdowns. O'Donnell's picks were so bad that you could accuse him of purposely throwing those picks on purpose to throw the game because he wanted out of Pittsburgh. Now, that may sound like a ridiculous acquisition, but just look at these picks right here and tell me that he was trying. While I wouldn't say that Cordell Stewart would have led the Steelers to a win in Super Bowl 30, the fact is the Steelers' defense held up their part in the game. They had a late rally going, and they needed one drive to take the lead and win the game. And O'Donnell's shit play cost the Steelers dearly in this game. Anyway, let's move on before I get too mad. San Francisco 49ers, Super Bowl 54. The 49ers had a dominant 13-3 season in 2019 and clinched home field throughout the playoffs. They reached the Super Bowl for the first time in 7 years and faced the Kansas City Chiefs in the big game. Kansas City was a 1.5-point favorite in the game, but people had doubts after San Francisco had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. It looked as if the 49ers were going to finally win their first Super Bowl in a quarter of a century, but they scored 0 points on 4 drives in the fourth quarter. That's the one thing that you don't do on offense. Stall when your opponent is Patrick Mahomes. The defense folded and allowed Kansas City to take a 24-20 lead with 2:44 left in the game. Even with Damian Williams' controversial touchdown, the 49ers defense kept allowing big plays all second half, and the offense blew several opportunities to put more points on the board. Williams ended any hopes with a 38-yard touchdown run with 1:12 left to ice the victory for Kansas City and their first Lombardi in half a century, and it would be their first of 3 Lombardis in 5 seasons. San Francisco still hasn't gotten over this crushing defeat despite the fact that they made it to the Super Bowl a few years later. The two met again in Super Bowl 58, and while it certainly is heartbreaking for the 49ers to lose in overtime, Super Bowl 58 just felt like an inevitable Chiefs win. Other bad losses for the Niners are the 1987 NFC Championship, 1991 NFC Championship, 2012 NFC Championship, 2014 NFC Championship, 2022 NFC Championship, and Super Bowl 47. But this one takes the cake for me personally because those losses were where San Francisco either battled back or they just simply got outplayed. This was a choke job, and that adds much more of an element of sadness to my list. Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl 49. Okay, let's be real. This is the only real entry here for the Seahawks. Everyone only remembers Russell Wilson throwing the game-losing interception at the 1-yard line when the Seahawks should have ran the ball with the best rushing offense all season. and Jermaine Kearse's insane catch to set them up at that position, but no one remembers Seattle's top defense blowing a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. No one talks about Seattle having 2 drives late in the third and early in the fourth with a 10-point lead and getting 0 points off of those. One of which included a huge third down drop by Jermaine Kearse in Patriots territory. Seattle also had the ball up 24-21 in the fourth and went 3 and out, and the Patriots got the ball back at their own 32 with 6:52 left. Seattle also picked off Tom Brady twice, and in typical Brady's luck, Cliff Avril and Jeremy Lane both got injured on Brady's picks. Despite all this, plus an injured defense, the Seahawks still could have had back-to-back championships, and then they made the dumbest play call in recent memory. When even Chris Collinsworth grills you on that play, you know that you screwed up. Seattle has not made the Super Bowl nor NFC Championship since, and nowadays they just seem to be hovering over being below average to above average. Tampa Bay Bucks, the 2000 NFC Championship. The Bucks have the worst winning percentage in NFL history, and they haven't had many heartbreaking losses, but this one easily takes the cake for them. Tampa went 11-5 in 1999 and won the NFC Central. In the playoffs, they nipped out a 14-13 win over the Washington Redskins and went to their first ever NFC Championship against the greatest show on turf, St. Louis Rams. Here, Tampa's defense held the Rams in check all games, something very few defenses were able to do in the greatest show on turf days. They limited them to 9 points on 10 possessions. The offense, however, didn't hold up their end of the deal as they got just 6 points on 11 possessions. The final of this game was 11-6 Rams as the Bucks kicked the field goal to go ahead 6-5 in the top of the 9th inning. But Kurt Warner found Ricky Proehl for a 30-yard touchdown to put St. Louis back up 11-6 but failed a 2-point conversion. The game was still in hand for the Bucks to win. Despite being sacked twice, Sean King responded by leading the Buccaneers to the Rams' 22-yard line. With 47 seconds remaining, King completed an apparent 13-yard reception to Burt Emanuel at the Rams' 22-yard line that set up 3rd and 10. The ruling on the field was initially a complete pass as officials spotted the ball at the 22. But after Tampa called a timeout, officials reviewed the catch, and it was determined that it was an incomplete pass as the nose of the ball touched the ground as Emanuel was bringing the ball to his body. The Bucks were forced to move back to the Rams' 35 for 3rd and 23. King threw 2 incompletions to turn the ball over on downs, and St. Louis was on their way to the Super Bowl. This game created the Burt Emanuel rule, as it clarifies what is constituted as a catch, kind of like the Jesse James. No, I am not going to go there. The Tennessee Titans. There are 2 obvious ones for the Titans here, so I decided to give it a tie. One for the Oilers and one for the Titans. Let's talk about the Oilers one first. The comeback. I mean, what more do I need to say? You go up 35-3 on Bubba McDowell's pick 6 early in the second half. Shortly after, the Bills found themselves having an offensive showing for the ages. Buffalo was without Jim Kelly in this game, but when backup Frank Reich found the holes in Houston's defense that was covered up by their offense all day, it was all over. Buffalo scored 5 straight touchdowns, 3 of them to Andre Reed in a span of about 12 minutes, and amazingly, the Bills had a 38-35 lead. Houston got a late field goal to tie the game up at 38, and the game went to overtime. Warren Moon threw a pick to set up the game winner for Steve Christie, and the Bills had one of the most stunning comebacks in NFL history, as this choke by the Oilers rivals that of the 2004 ALCS, 28-3 in the 2016 NBA Finals. Dude, imagine if social media was around back then. Man, the Oilers would have got shit on endlessly for this game, and they should still be getting shit on for it. But then, 7 years later, the Oilers relocated to Nashville, and that's where this other entry comes in. The Tennessee Titans found themselves in Super Bowl 34 against the St. Louis Rams. They were a nice feel-good team that season, but the ride looked over at halftime as they trailed 9-0, but were overwhelmingly outgained 294-89 in total yardage. After being down 16-0, the Titans showed their resilience. The Titans defense stepped up and even got a 3-and-out on the Rams, and all of a sudden the Titans had all the momentum. Tennessee tied the game only for the Rams to immediately take it back when Kurt Warner found Isaac Bruce on a 73-yard bomb. Tennessee would respond with a nice drive of their own. McNair avoided a sack in one of the most incredible maneuverabilities in the pocket you'll ever see and completed a pass to Kevin Dyson to set up 1st and goal at the Rams' 10. Then, the moment that made this game iconic. Known as the tackle or 1 yard short, this is one of the most exciting Super Bowls in league history, but the most heartbreaking loss for the franchise since moving to Nashville. I personally find it hard to rank which is worse between the two, but if you ask me, that's why I included both in the century. But if I were to rank just one, I'd go with Super Bowl 34 being slightly worse because 35-3 really was just seen as nothing new for the Oilers, as they had numerous playoff meltdowns before that, but that one was just unlike any other. Super Bowl 34, on the other hand, was played on the biggest stage, and the Titans were 1 yard away from making an already exciting game even more exciting, and could have won the franchise's only Lombardi. Either way, both these losses are devastating. Washington Commanders, the Joe Theismann game. For the sake of trying to be considerate, I won't be showing the injury because I don't know if you're squeamish or not, but any football fan knows what happened. On November 18th, 1985, Joe Theismann suffered a fracture on the tibia and fibula of his right leg when he was sacked by linebackers Lawrence Taylor and Harry Carson. It took place in D.C. as the Redskins were hosting the New York Giants in a 7-7 game in the second quarter. As Washington was attempting a flea flicker, Theismann handed the ball off to fullback John Riggins, who lateraled the ball back to the quarterback. But New York's defense read the play, and they sent the house on a blitz to Theismann. As Taylor pulled Theismann down, Taylor's knee came down and drove straight into Theismann's lower right leg, fracturing both the tibia and fibula, as Giants linebackers Gary Reasons and Harry Carson also joined Taylor in on the sack. As Theismann went down, Taylor immediately popped to his feet and began frantically waving before looking back and seeing Theismann sprawled out on the ground. Initially, many Redskins personnel thought Taylor was taunting after the play, before quickly realizing that Theismann was seriously injured. But it was later confirmed that Taylor knew immediately that something had happened and was trying to signal for help from the emergency medical technicians. While initially the only players on the field could see the extent of the damage to Theismann's leg, the reverse angle instant replay provided a clearer view of what had actually happened. Theismann's lower leg bones were broken midway between his knee and his ankle, such that his leg from his foot to his mid-shin was laying flat against the ground, while the upper part of his shin up to his knee was at a 45-degree angle to the lower part of his leg. A very similar injury happened to Alex Smith exactly 33 years later in the 2018 season against the Houston Texans, when Kareem Jackson and J.J. Watt sacked Smith when Theismann was at the game. Smith at least managed to play again in the NFL, while this injury ended Theismann's career. New York won 23-21, while Washington gave Doug Williams a shot at being the starter in 1986, and let's say that worked out just fine. But this moment has consistently been called the most gruesome injury in NFL history. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, or not, depending on who you cheer for, unless you're kind of like a masochist like I am. But yeah, these are just my opinions, and like I said, did I leave any out? Let me know in the comments, and hey, if you made it through the whole video, thanks for the support. If not, well then you're not a true fan. But anyway, let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe.